Good afternoon, good evening, depending where you're calling from. It's kind of strange. I actually have Reid in the same time zone. Actually, I'm assuming that. I don't know that for a fact. Are you back from Texas, Reid?
I am, yeah. I flew back and got in about midnight last night, so I'm enjoying my coffee and adjusting to the time difference a little bit.
Other than the smoke, what beautiful weather, huh?
Hey, at least it's cooler. The temperature's dropped.
Yeah, it's been beautiful weather here in Seattle. So, and I am actually off for a 2-week vacation to go back out fishing. Who would have guessed that Chuck was going to go fishing? So Reid, actually, I nominated 5 or 6 times to be an MVP. And it's not to say that he doesn't have the credentials. It's just a skip in our process is why you're not an MVP, I'm guessing. We need to figure that out. But he is super active. He goes out and blogs at Power Pivot Pro. He actually goes out and helps run our user group. Delivers dashboard to days. He actually is a professor at the local community college and at the University of Washington, and actually did a guest lecture for me while I was in the Maldives. So, Reid, you've got quite a resume. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself and what are you going to cover today? What are we going to look at?
Yeah, absolutely. So you covered quite a few bases. I've very much enjoy doing a lot of the public speakings and things like that. And in general, I've actually found that overall, I've been curating a lot of videos in the last year or so, and I've found that's actually a really great medium to share and do a lot of walkthroughs. The thing that we have in front of us specifically today is something that I ended up just kind of randomly poking around with a bunch of custom visuals and everything else, and ended up just kind of as a pet project coming up with this idea of creating a KPI dashboard just as a general template, and thought like, hey, this would actually be probably something a lot of people would find interesting or useful to see. At least there's a lot of those kind of design sugarcoating of the designs and everything else that goes with this. So I ended up, I'm now actually in the middle of kind of doing a multi-part video series on it, and thought this would be a great thing to share during a webinar. Just to create this out of a template and understand a little bit of DAX, a little bit of actually how to use some custom visualizations. It kind of just covers all of the bases on a lot of really cool Power BI tips and tricks. And
I know you didn't work on it, but actually the dashboard that you're showing right there looks a lot like my team scorecard. I literally just walked out of a meeting, and they look very similar. The swim lanes and the columns and the metaphors where you look at a glance. So yeah, this will be good. Again, the fact that we're doing very similar things means that there must be some reason for it, right?
What's the great minds think alike, yeah?
Well, in this case, it was Station on my team, not me, but yes, exactly right.
Yeah. So I've kind of I've broken it up into chunks, and there'll kind of be 4 parts that I'll walk through today. But what I kind of just want to show you is the actual functionality of the report itself before we kind of dive into it. And I think cover because I'm not going to create every single card. That will be way too many, but I will certainly cover enough to kind of teach how to fish, as they will say, and get all of that. But yeah, what all of these are is everything on this page is a series of individual objects. I tried for a while to use some of there's the KPI matrix and a bunch of other visuals that get something that looks roughly like this, but it still wasn't quite as customizable as I wanted it to be. It felt like there were some things lacking, and I'm very picky when it comes to the visualization components, meaning the colors, whether or not there's certain spacing between stuff, even just having white space in the background and all of that. Like I couldn't quite find the right visual for that, and I did not want to custom code my own. That would be its own rabbit hole that I didn't want to go down. So I instead decided to do a combination of tiles, and I think this might actually take the record for visible, at least, not including bookmarks, the most number of tiles that or visualizations and individual visualizations that I've ever had on a single report page. And it still runs pretty well. The one thing I noticed is if I open the report, it might take 3 to 5 seconds for it to actually fully render. But you can see here, if you actually click the slices and everything, all the DAX recalculates within 1 to 2 seconds. So it still operates really fast. And there's a lot of different things that are going on. There's a mixture of images, essentially, or almost like emojis that are being returned via some DAX tricks that we can discuss as well today. The fact that even some of the arrows in there and color coding that's being included in some of this, because I know one thing that I often get requested from customers is I like the card visuals. Is there a way to do color coding? I wanted to have some KPI colors in there to organize that, but not have it in a table. And that's going to you through the use here of some of the custom visuals that we will also see probably about halfway through the session today. And then of course, just these standard sparklines that we have over on the right that are also using custom visuals, both by OKViz, from Marco Russo and Alberto Ferrari, who help get those created and refreshed every month. There's a lot of cool stuff that kind of goes on in here that I think I found fit very well overall, and just this scorecard design. The primary purpose being really each row is information about a specific metric. So information about sales amount, information about return amount, and kind of just so on down the line. But it's grouped by that with then key metrics related to it, whether or not it's rank, total value. So these are all just general ideas of something that for this specific report fits for, say, stores and that information. But I think taking this to more of a meta level, just this general layout, and it sounds like you already have one like this, Chuck, I think just works really well for information in this grid fashion when it comes to scorecards.
Yep. I mean, again, it draws your eye to the right place. It has all the right dynamics. So yeah.
Cool. Then I think what I can do is, like I mentioned, I split it into about 4 parts. I'd love to walk through those. I'm going to try to leave a little bit of room at the end for something that Chuck, you and I discussed before, and that I didn't know was a feature that might be a cool little thing to showcase at the very end. But what I'd like to do is really move over here. Let me open up my part 1. And I like to kind of show a slide of like what I teach. It's the same thing when I do trainings or classes. If I actually spent time making every object on a report, that's a lot of spinning the wheels and rinse and repeating. So I'm going to actually focus on, as you can kind of see now, being called out, these 3 sections here at the top. And even more specifically, I will be looking at walking us through this first row here to kind of cover the basics of just creating the cards and the KPIs here. And then the one thing that's separate that will kind of wrap up towards the end before I cover some of the formatting and visualizations is going to be the color coding on these. And I kind of split it up into chunks and created a bunch of versions of reports that will allow me to kind of skip ahead and essentially hit a fast forward button. You don't have to sit here and drink your coffee and then watch me do all the fine tuning. So that will let us keep a good pace and cover more content during this hour. All right, let me come over here, and I'll actually, before I start to this, I'm gonna mention the very first thing that I wanted to talk about. So I spent some time trying to figure out how to create one of these. Like there's a text box that you can do in Power BI. And that is something you can add in, but I've found that getting it perfectly centered was always kind of frustrating for me. It's you can put a space in there and things like that, but it's hard to get it exactly in the middle. And I'm again a stickler for detail for that. So what I actually did is I'm using a card right here that is in fact a DAX measure that's simply just returning a text value, like it's just equals sales amount in quotes. And I found that actually was a really good way to get that nice centered looking title card that to me was not as easily attainable using the text box. So that's kind of where we're going to start with. And then I want to work our way from left to right and just kind of walk through a little bit of this. And I'm not going to spend too much time explaining every single component of the DAX, but I'll stop long enough to at least explain the general concept. But I don't want to go through like the DAX 101 thing of any of the stuff that we'll be covering today. All right. Come over here to part 1. And like I mentioned, what I'm actually going to use for this is I'm going to use that card visual that's up here. And you might notice there's a few other here at the bottom. We'll get to those once we start talking about some of those KPI custom visuals at the end. But I'm going to create a brand new card visual. I'm going to go ahead and pop this up here. And if you haven't used it yet, you might notice that there's kind of snap functions. The biggest time saver in the world for me is the snapped objects to grid. That allows things to be aligned really quickly and easily when it's in here. So just as a nice little tip there. I'm just going to stick this in here. Like I said, what I'm going to put into this is a measure that is just going to be a nice and easy name call out, which needs to be sales amount text, and easily done, just sales amount in quotes. Perfect. Back out, bring that over into the field section. And a teeny bit of formatting is needed for that, but the cards don't have too much in terms of the complexity for that. So I'm actually going to let's temporarily just knock you over here so you can actually watch the transformations in a zoom perspective. I'm gonna kick off that category label. I'm gonna drop this down to, I believe the like 19 worked. And let's just give it a quick splash of color, lighten that font up, and I will give it something, a little bit of background. There we go. Perfect. Yeah, so I do this for other things too occasionally. If I want to create any kind of card that has a text value in it, I will usually do this. The one thing that this won't do, unlike a text box, just as an FYI, is I have not seen any way for it to do text wrapping. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chuck, but I don't believe that's attainable in any way using the built-in single card visuals. Correct?
I'd have to take a look. I actually haven't played with it. I've been building a lot of custom visuals lately, so that would be where I'd start. Was actually start playing with my own. But I'll take a look and see if I can't get back to it on the chat window itself. Oh,
so if I ever need a custom text box DAX visual, I can give you a call then. Okay.
You do anyways. So absolutely, I'm expecting it.
Cool. Perfect. Yeah, so I'm just going to continue down the line. This next one's actually going to be a couple step process. So the store rank, what I wanted to do is I wanted to first attain the rank, but I wanted something that was more valuable because to me, the store rank by itself was kind of giving me some amount of information, but like it's in comparison to what? It's almost like knowing, my monthly sales growth was 28,000. Okay, well, was that 28,000 against 100,000 sales? I need something to give it perspective. So I actually will go through and create the initial calculation, which will determine this. And then I'm separately going to create a calculation that's going to grab the number of total stores there are. So that way, you know what their rank is against the all up number. And that's going to end up in a card with the DAX calculation that is going to be a concatenation of both of those values together. All right, over here. And the beautiful thing with everything in Power BI is copy and paste is one of your best friends. So I will reuse a lot of what I just did here and put that over there. And now that I've got it sizing, and with each of these cards, I'm going to kind of keep it just nested over here temporarily. So that way I don't have to keep switching back and forth. A couple of quick fixes though, kill the background, put the text back to something a bit more reasonable. There we go. And drop that down a little bit more so you can actually see it in. And like I mentioned, I'm going to do 3 steps. So it's 3 calculations total that are going to be combined together. So that first one is I really want to determine the rank of whatever said store that I'm selecting over here. So that's going to be sales amount rank. That's going to be rank X. There we go. And the table itself, I want this to be ranked over the stores. So this is going to be all. I think it's store name. There we are. That's going to be the table. And then the expression is just sales amount. There we go. Now, one thing just to mention, I'm not going to do it for every single one, but it's usually a good practice just to make sure you apply that formatting if you need to. And there's a whole number already set. It's good to go. So that's component number 1. Number 2 is I'm going to want to calculate the total count of all the stores. So that is store count. That's going to be calculate. Distinct count. And the reason I'm doing calculated, not just a distinct count, I'll mention in a second. Store name, there we go. Now in here, I want to include the all function as part of my filter for the store name, meaning I don't want this number to ever change from the model. So anytime I select store name, I don't want that to filter it out. I want it to stay at essentially whatever the 299 in this case will be. But I'm also creating this as a calculation and not just simply concatenating that final value against the text of 299. Because what happens if my number of stores changes, if one gets added, one gets closed. So this will continue to shift with my data. All right, store count. Now, final piece in that is going to be the 3 of them together. So I'm going to go ahead and create the store rank text. Now I used to use concatenate a lot, but I found that it's easier for multi-part concatenations that, especially if it's 3 or more, just use the ampersand or and symbol. So that's going to be for the first one, sales amount rank, and and then in quotes of a space leading and trailing, followed by the store count. There we are. Take a look at this on the card. There we go. Let's just take a quick peek to see that actually working. So there you go. You can see what it's ranked at for this store. So Anchorage, as an example, is 76 best sales out of that, and so on and so forth down the list. So it gives you a good perspective of where they rank for that value. And let me just kick that font up just a little bit. Good enough. All right. I'll keep going down. And as we go through these, it's going to start to get a little bit cooler features and more dynamic in terms of the stuff we're going to be doing with DAX. Total value is going to be a pretty quick, simple and easy one to calculate. That's simply just the sales amount that I'm going to bring in here. And do one quick formatting. I've never understood, and maybe I'll just mention this as like a 5-second thing to you, Chuck. It bothers me that the default formatting for cards when it's in the millions is like it rounds so much, and it's one of those things like it's almost too extreme of a rounding as a default setting. Yeah. I never understood why they don't include like at least 1 decimal as the default for that.
Yeah. So, and Richard Vanderpool is saying, a lot of this we could now do in a table itself and actually use format it for that. Oh, like what you're doing now. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I generally remove the display units. I change it under the data level. At a minimum, if it's set to auto, I'll kick it up to 2 decimal places at least. And or if there's room, just might as well display the full number. And get rid of those decimal places because that's just chart junk at this point. Beautiful. Okay. Here's the fun one. The monthly average. Now, in some of these, as these the code starts to get a little longer to save time, I am going to copy and paste and cheat a little bit. I do have a set of code that I will use, but I will still explain exactly what those are. So what I want to do for this, for monthly averages, I really want to know per month what is going to be what is the average calculation or the average sales amount over any amount of time. So that's actually going to be using the X function, which is it's a row iterator. I'm going to create like a virtual table for this that's going to calculate or iterate month over month. I'm going to come up to measures, select the new measure again. I want this to be sales amount monthly average. And there's no wrong ways to name really DAX calculations as long as the name at least alludes to or implies whatever is being calculated inside of it. And as I said, I'm going to do an average. Typically, I want to average over the month. So I can't just average over the original table because that's at the day level. So I'm going to average X. It'll be a row iterator. And what is my table going to be? I want my table to be a distinct list of the column or of the month and year. So that table right here is exactly what this is calculating. This is going to return a distinct list of every month and year from my calendar table. And what is it averaging? It is going to average sales amounts. All right. We'll put a bit of format sugar on there and set that to currency. And 0. There we are. And now if I replace that, let me expand this out just so we can actually see the titles. Good enough. Sales amount monthly average. There we go. All right. Now this last one that I want to do is I want to be able to return. And now this is actually something that can be done automatically in the KPI matrix, where there is a checkbox to say return latest. But in this case, there is no function for that, at least for measures in here to say return first or last once it's in a calculation form. But what I want to do is I want this to be whatever latest month is being has had sales in it. So that's what I want to calculate here. So I'm going to break this out into 2 components. I'm going to I'm going to first obtain the max month that any sales was, or any whatever month had sales in, and then after that, I'm going to do a calculation to return that. I'm going to do a new measure as well again. That's one that I just copied a second ago. And it's going to calculate the max month and year here. And what I'm doing, just to make sure that it never gets filtered by anything, I always want it to return and remain unfiltered, which is why I'm including that all function in here. And it's also filtering it to only those for the sales amount. Because in theory, my calendar table could have another 2 to 3 years of data in the future, which is often how you should build a calendar table out. You don't usually want it to stop at the day of, because then it might be, it'll become stale as soon as the refresh pushes past that date. So this will make sure that it only goes forward as far as there was ever any sales amounts. All right. The only other thing I'll grab right here. Okay. 1 sec. Need to grab it from this guy. There you go. Okay. I want to create the latest month sales calculation in here. Come up to new measures. I'm going to copy pasta that again one more time. Would love it if those things automatically opened up for you whenever you copied long code into them. All right. So yeah, sales latest, and I'll just quickly run through this. So I am going to calculate my sales amount, and I am going to filter my calendar table, and I only want it to calculate where the month and year is equal to that max month that I just calculated. So this will dynamically always return basically latest month's sales. All right. Go ahead and set that for currency one more time. I think it does a fun calculation. I had fun creating the KPI, so that's going to be next. Bring that around. Oh yeah, I did. Like, because there's like 3 or 4 processes that go into that, but I created a cool time window for that. There you go. There's the latest month. So we have the 83,000 for the latest month. Their average was about 150, and you get a lot of really good, useful metrics related to this sales amount here. Now you might be wondering, like, do you have to do this for every row? And I did. I ended up probably with, I'd say, 40 or 50 measures that were in the actual model itself. But that's the great thing with DAX, is the cost in terms of storage to have them in your model is very little. They only take up performance when they calculate. I've built the enterprise level Power BI or tabular SSAS models that have had hundreds, and I think the most that I've ever seen is like a little bit over 1,000 DAX measures for just all business scenarios in there, and they still ran fine. If you ever end up with a report page that has a few hundred of them calculated all at once, you might hit an issue. But that's the great thing, is you can throw as many in there as you need, and as long as they're written well, they'll all have a use for them. So I really like the ability to just shotgun them in as much as I need to create custom report pages like this. All right. Just to do a quick check up to this point, was there any questions that anybody had before I switch over to that KPI?
There's actually been a great comments. Paul says he loves that grid layout that you've got. Thimu Raju was asking which shapes, but I think you actually showed that, like you're using cards for these particular shapes itself. And then Richard Vanderpool was saying, oh, we could have actually done a lot of this with the SVGs and the new matrix categories. And I said, yeah, you're going to get to that in the end. You're going to show that at the when we get a little bit later into it. So not a lot of questions we haven't answered, a lot of comments though.
Exactly, yeah, and there are some ways to do things also utilizing the new abilities in matrix tables themselves, and it goes back to the just to answer that question, how much do you want to be able to customize or add like the lines between. So the reason I went for this specific approach is the fact that I think I can customize the UI more so. Like I can. Well,
you could do literally anything with the way you've got it designed here.
Yep, exactly.
People think it's a grid. They think it's some crazy table, but that's just a formatting metaphor, and it's a very powerful one that we all understand. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it at the end of the day, it often goes back to the are you building this for the client, or does the client need that level of customization? Because the development time will be higher. I find that for me the payoff just comes from something that's much more unique. But then there's also, if your customer is more focused on the output and doesn't care as much about the visual sugar, then yeah, certainly there are cleaner, quicker approaches that will maybe not look as fancy, but still deliver approximately the same results. So it just all depends on the business requirements at the end of the day and what's prioritized. All right, so the let me actually show the card here. So this one, I want to talk about a little bit. So there's a couple of things that lead into this. Now the title could be better named. I just called it KPI because again, this is kind of more of a template. But what I've done here with these two charts that are inside of this is I've created a card that looks at, or I should say a KPI, that looks at the last 6 months trend of sales data on average, and specifically the month-over-month growth. So over the last 6 months, was there a general upwards trend, meaning greater than 0, or a negative trend, less than 0? Let me see if I can just show you the example on one of these. I can find one quickly that has, there we go, yep. Yeah, so you can see that sometimes they go down, sometimes they go up. The one thing that I personally find somewhat annoying is the fact that the growth is given red and a decline is given blue. I don't know if that's more of a financial thing or not, but I would, red to me is usually indicative of negative potentially. So and I can't customize that, frustratingly. It's still nice to show trends, but I think they could have picked better colors to show positive versus negative growth. All right. So I'm going to come over to part 2, which is where I'll lead off. Like I said, I like to hop in my DeLorean and time travel. So I'm now in part 2 of the reports that I have, which is have the rest of the visuals built out here for the other 3 rows of what we've already covered. And now I'm going to talk about that KPI right here. And it's going to be a few things that are going to lead up to it. So I'm first going to create a DAX calculation that will let me calculate the prior month. And from there, I can create the month-over-month sales growth. And then I'll finally end up with that 6-month trend that I will have as the actual thing that will then go into a KPI. So there'll be a few DAX measures that lead into this and kind of build off of each other. But that's the other great thing with DAX is they can be used as that like Lego block or branching tree structure. So I'm going to start with prior month. For anybody who's ever done time intelligence, you're probably familiar with the date add function, and that's exactly what I'm going to use here. So PM for prior month, sales amount. We calculate sales amount. I'm going to use date add. And anytime you're using time intelligence functions too, it's really important that you have a separate calendar table for 2 reasons. The primary one, just as a quick mention of this, is the fact that calendar tables have continuous dates, meaning there's no gaps. Anytime you use something against a records table or a sales table, if there's missing periods where data was not recorded, time intelligence calculations like date add get really grumpy because there's missing spots where it can't iterate over. And I don't know all the actual coding stuff that goes into that, but I know that it will be a very painful process if you don't have a separate calendar table for these kind of things. So I always recommend to people the second table that you ever or additional table that you add into a data model, if at all possible, have that be a calendar table if you're ever working with dates. All right. Calendar table. And what do I want to do? It's almost a misnomer that it's called date add because I really am subtracting. So this really, in my opinion, should be called date modify. But it's one of those, like, you work with a piece of software, thousands of hours, you eventually find the little things that bug you. So -1 and month. So I want to shift back 1 month. Close the parentheses. And I am skipping over a few of the formatting things. Like prior month is never going to be shown in a card in this workbook. So I have no need to actually come up and set a format for that because it's designed more just to be a harvester measure for other ones, or a measure that would be built off of. All right. So I got that, and now we're going to create the mom measure for month over month. Right, sales amount. This is going to be a nice and clean one. So this is just going to be full sales or sales amount. There we are, minus prior month. Perfect. And now that we have this, I'm going to go ahead and steal some of my code again that I've written here. I think it is right here. Here we are. All right. Let's select new measure. And it did expand out this time. This will be, one second. I need the name of it too, just to be, here we go. Didn't grab quite the whole thing. All right, so I'll quickly just mention what I'm doing here. So I'm creating a 6-month trend. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to determine what was my last sales date for my sales table. And I'm declaring that as a variable because that value is going to be fixed, doesn't need to change. And now I'm going to calculate that average month over month. So let me see if I can draw here. Yeah, I want to know what my average monthly sales amount was. Specifically, what is the date range that I'm looking? So I'm using dates between, and the date range that I'm looking at is month and year, and it's going to start here. So what is my first date? So it's going to look at the last sales date for my sales table. It's going to the start of the month for that, and then it's going to subtract 5. So it's going to go back 5 months from the start, and then it's going to do the same thing with that last sales date here, again, from that variable up at the top, and it's going to look at the end of the month. So that will now create a 6-month window that will roll with this. So it's a rolling 6-month window for that month over month sales amount that is being averaged. All right, and this I actually, same thing. I don't even need to format it because that is also going to be leading into a KPI here. So the final one that I want to use, and I'm also going to pop up a web page in a second because Matt Allington is actually the inspiration that I used for the Unicar, or he was the one that led me onto it last fall when he wrote an article on it. So let me first put in the KPI thing here, and then I want to briefly show that site that actually walks you through how to create these, which is pretty fantastic. And at least at the time, Chuck, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the Unicar function was not available in Excel. It was only available in Power BI. Do you know if that's changed?
I believe that's still the case.
Okay, yeah. So this is something that is pertained only to Power BI desktop and matrix tables, because I believe just pivot tables cannot support the Unicar function currently. I don't know if it's in process or not, but this here is a Power BI specific function from DAX. There aren't that many because for those of you who've worked with both, they are very similar platforms, but there are a few things every once in a while where they add a function specifically for Power BI that either will eventually come or doesn't have a plan to come over to Excel. And this is one of them. So let me kind of break down the pieces that we have here. We're seeing again the variables at the top and a couple of them to call out. So I have 2 variables here and here for chart increase and decrease. And what this actually is there's a function called Unicar that can take any Unicar number, which is an assigned number that relates to an icon essentially that is returned. And this is for that chart increase or chart decrease ones that you've seen. And then I'm also declaring the variable for that 6-month trend. What is that value? And then that leaves me, after I've declared those, a very nice clean statement here at the bottom using switch true, which is essentially a nested if statement or case when in SQL. And if my 6-month trend is less or greater than or equal to 0, show increase. And if it is essentially less than 0, then it actually should be that. There we go. Otherwise, they're double dipping. Show a chart decrease. So that's going to be the KPI that I have right here. All right. Many years that I've used DAX, it's amazing how often and how many cool things they continue to add to it. That just always thoroughly impresses me. This is definitely one of them. I probably spent, I would say, a couple of hours just figuring out what emojis and Unicars you could put into here. Comically enough, the poop emoji that is on phones, you can actually put that in Power BI and it renders it in full color. That is a Power BI supported feature.
Just be careful when you try changing the colors. So there's different browsers and different platforms support the colors of those emojis, and some don't. So
interesting.
Yeah. So watch out when you start changing like the background colors and whatnot in those. Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
That's a great tip. And I realized I also skipped over what I just clicked on. So by the way, what I'm using right now, I will hover over just to show the name. I am using something called Cards with States by OKViz. That is something that's already in here, but that can be just searched for and downloaded directly in the Microsoft Store. And it's very similar to the built-in card, but just with a lot more features to customize and tweak in terms of color states and things like that. So that's what I want to use for this. All right, go ahead and just quickly get that aligned up. And snapping the grid makes this super easy for me. There we are. Now I'm going to bring in, let me search for that KPI. Time. Look pretty good for time. Perfect. And I'm going to put that right here. Come on. There we go. Now, a couple of things to clean up a little bit. So right now it's a little too big to actually to show up in there, but come over to the handy dandy paint roller, kill that category label. And now let's just drop this down a couple of sizes. See if we can, that's still visible. 1, 2, 3, 4, keep going. Oh, there we go. Beautiful. And it returns it in there. And just to show that it's working, just quickly click on a few of these, see if I can find one. There we go. Get pop to positive, to negative. Yeah, so we can see that it's working and filtering. And as mentioned already, like, yeah, these can also be included in matrix tables just as well. So if you actually have a table that you want to have with a lot more rows, these can be included in there as a column, and they work in the same method.
So, sorry to interrupt, but for Thimu, Raju, can you actually click on one of those lines so you can show them how you did a line, or add another line that you're pseudo making a grid for?
Oh yeah, that'll actually be in part 4. So.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, good.
Yeah. So I forget the term, but so like SQL BI likes to call their things for formula syntax sugar. I kind of call that design sugar. So all that design sugar at the end of this, which is what makes this pop as a report, that will be the very last thing that we'll cover at the end.
Yeah, and Cole says removing clutter or focusing context. Okay, got it. Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. What can you do to draw the eye, basically? All right. So yeah, that KPI there will be our first step. The last thing that I want to put on this one before I kind of hit that hop into the DeLorean again and fast forward to the next section, I want to show you about that how to add that sparkline here to the very end section that we can kind of already see previewed in some of these grayed out ones down below. So it's one of those things where it seems like I'm promoting OKViz, but it's the fact that they really do make the best custom visuals. I've used a few others, and at least the ones in the marketplace, I often will come back to theirs. That's just a really, really good quality one. So their sparkline's fantastic, and I want to use that as well. So I'm going to create that. And I think pretty much all of theirs are free except for just one recent smart filter that they unveiled. But yeah, I love the fact that 99% of the custom visuals that are that are available for Power BI are all mostly open source and free to use. Okay, so let's do a couple of things here, and I want to show you kind of a non-ideal way and then a more ideal way to do this, because yeah, we got time. So in theory, I could just put the date on the axis, and what I want to show is the trend for sales amount or any metric that I have on my rows. So I can add this as the values too. But that, as you can kind of tell, is way too much granularity. Like that's noise at this point. So rather than using the date, and everything else is already at the month and year, and again, the fact that I have a calendar table is making this extremely easy to use. I'm going to use month and year, which helps a lot. And there's a couple of little formatting tricks that I'm going to do on this just to get it to pop a bit more. I don't need the category label because that's already on my at the beginning of this line. So I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to kick up if I can scoot this down so we can watch. Here we go. Better. I'm going to kick up the weight to about 1 higher. And then in here, under the points, I want to turn on current point. So we're going to get 3 points now. It's going to show us our highest, our lowest, and whatever the latest one is. Just draws it out a bit more. And I've actually found that I really like the area as well. If we can zoom in just a little bit. What it does is that anything below it kind of shades it in just to help further distinguish that and give it a little bit of color characteristics in there. See if I can find one that's maybe looks a little bit better too. There we go. Yeah, that looks a little bit better. Yeah, so sparklines are great. And at the end too, if we have time, Chuck, I know you mentioned some things about sparklines in actual matrix tables as well with some images. I'd be curious to see if you have anything to show for 1 or 2 minutes of that. But in general, I think sparklines are a great and useful thing to have, just to give you some high level information. And at a minimum, it gets people asking questions, which is always a good thing. All right. Is there, just before I hit the fast forward button again, was there any questions on that you have before going on to the next section?
Nope. Everything's good to go.
All right. Fast forward one more time. Boop. There you go. And as you can see, pop these in now, same concept. But what I want to focus on is right here. I want to add a little bit of variation to this, and I want to create these something more akin to, if I can come back out, I want to be able to do something like this. I'd love to be able to create, and especially for a return amount, because I actually created some artificial metrics for this, but I have 3 buckets that I want to be able to call out for these values here. For the return amount percentage, which is how much dollars were returned versus dollars spent, I want to create 3 general buckets. I want to say that if it's 1.2% or higher, that's in the red. If it's between 0.8% and 1.2%, like you can see in front of you, that's going to be yellow. And anything 0.8% or lower is going to be colored green. And then I also want to have an arrow associated with it that will also be colored as well. Now, there's something important to note about this that I have a general broad understanding of it, but there are certain unicar symbols that are returned that aren't an image or an icon. They're essentially non-alphanumeric text. So in those cases, they can still be color formatted. I don't know if you know any further information on that, Chuck, but these ones at the top are not at all a font in any way. That is essentially an image being loaded that I have no way of adjusting. But these ones I can separately color via font color or states or things like that. So there is, from what I've seen, 2 types of unicars that can be returned. Ones that can be returned, ones with the ability to get color shaded, and ones that cannot.
So the color shaded ones is what we were just talking about a second ago. And again, on some platforms, you want to be careful of that. And then I'll actually show you a pointer to how you can actually draw your own little lines that you're pointing to the top, that those are images, because you don't have to use static images. You can actually dynamically draw those lines.
Oh, okay. And can you do that in card visuals, or would that be in a matrix table?
That would be a matrix or a table.
Okay. Oh, cool. So either of the table visuals. Okay.
Now, what am I talking about? It would be anything that you could actually render an image. So you could actually go out and use so like a chiclet slicer or anything that you can actually, just the image itself. Anything that you can get a URL into. So anyways, we'll get to that at the end if we have time.
Perfect. All right. 43. Yeah. It's you do custom app or custom development. If you ever have an inkling and want to create a card visual that returns an image, that would be fantastic. Meaning just a box that returns a single image for DAX. Because I can kind of do that already with matrix tables, but that would be an amazing thing to have now that you can do DAX with images. If there's a custom visual that just returns one single box image.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, let's apply a little syntax sugar or format and design sugar to these things and put some states into here. So I'm going to start out with, and I'm actually going to use this one because that's closest to my layout, and I think I should be able to keep both on screen. So I'm going to change this from a card. And I'm going to go ahead and change that to cards with states. Well, the same one that I used for these KPIs. I'm going to change that to that. And again, I'm going to go ahead and cut off the category label, and I believe, if I recall, I think 19 roughly has it at the same size. There we go. So yeah, I mean, at this point now, they look nearly identical. However, the cards with states has a couple of other settings that we have in here. So there is a section for actual states, and then an option for effect and data label. A whole bunch of cool things you can customize in here, way more than I can cover. Probably not even a few things that I myself haven't even explored yet. But I want to create those 3 states that I mentioned, which is the 1.2 and above, 0.8 to 1.2%, and then anything below that. So I'm going to say greater than or equal to. And then you just walk your way down and create those states. So state A, it's going to be red if it is greater than 1.2, greater than or equal to. And that translates to 0.012 as a decimal. I'm going to go ahead and give that an orange for kind of the caution, the 008. And then lastly, kind of by the way, fun fact, scrolling here changes that number, which I've mistakenly done multiple times now. An interesting little feature in there. And then green, and this is the one that took me a couple of times of thinking to figure it out. But what you really want to do is you want to put a number in here so far out of the range that it buckets everything between 0.08 and any theoretical number this could ever return. So in my case, I just put a very large negative number in there. That's the best way that I've learned how to do it. There might be a better way, but that will just make sure that anything smaller than this, and this number will never ever get this small. So it's a very wide window to make sure that all those other categories are green, because there isn't any actual spot in here for just else. Like if an if statement, that last condition, if no others are met, doesn't quite exist, but this essentially is doing the same thing. All right. And you can see that it's colored it in red here. And if you click around on a couple of these other ones, there we go. You can see that it's changing the 3 colors. We got the green, the orange, and the red popping up depending on which state we are experiencing on these cards. Now, ideally, whenever I can, I try to save time on having to redo things. I wished my dream of dreams that this format painter would work between custom visuals, but alas, it does not. So to me, the workaround to save the time is go ahead and just delete those, and then just copy and paste, and then just swap the measures out. Because now all that extra work that really most of the effort was put in setting up those states, now I can just swap it out for the values, which I shall do here just super quick. Bills amount. Oh, actually, that's a return. Percentage. There you are. Percentage here. This is the monthly. So that's there. And there you go. Saves a little bit of time to get to that point. Now, this is the one where I actually had the most fun making of all of them, is actually figuring out that I could create the unicar plus do the color shading, which it sounds like it's somewhat cautionary depending on your browser. But at least testing in Chrome, it's worked pretty well in Firefox. So I want to change this visual now to the 3 arrows that will correspond with these 3 states. It's going to point down if it's in the red. It's going to kind of point to the right, kind of neutral if it's in the yellow, and then it will point up if it's green. Or sorry, what I said, but the opposite direction. One of the, yeah, I realized.
What I said, but not what I said.
other way. Yeah, I remember specifically actually having to go back and forth in this as a quick tangent, because it's is it going in the direction that the data is literally flowing, or is it going in the metaphorical direction that we think of up is better, down is worse? And I think I ended up deciding on attaching the arrow direction with the physical direction, that positive and negative. But I believe I switched it back and forth a few times, hence the mental confusion that I still have to this day. All right. Let me go ahead and cheat a little bit again and come down here. I'm going to copy my code, save myself a bit of time. Now, this one already has everything needed for it, because what I want to do for this is I want to base my new calculation that I'm doing here. I want to base that off of the latest month. So I want those two to correlate to each other. And again, like I know it's not necessarily the clearest marked. If I was to actually build this for a customer, I might include a couple of extra sections in here, maybe a text call out, some further information to kind of explain what is going on with that KPI, so it's not just ambiguous data. But the DAX wouldn't change at all. All right, we're nearly spot on for time. New measure. It expands sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't. I can never figure out why it will open up on some and not others. All right, return percentage latest. The very similar process as before. This time I actually have 3 variables being returned for 3 unicars for the up, the middle, and the down, and whatever that latest percentage is as well. And then the calculations at the bottom follow the exact same logic that we had in the states. So 1.2% above gets the up. If it's not equal to that, checks the next condition for 0.8 for the middle. And then lastly, returns that final one down if it is less than for that. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and, did I click enter? I did not. Beautiful. That into here. Now, what this does is that returns it into this section, and currently it is pointing up because that's the high number that we're associated to this. Let me quickly just go to that data label and kick this up. I think I found 36. The one thing that I've, interestingly enough, that I found as a kind of a weird little thing with this is you'll notice that it kind of pops around. It kind of shifts up and down as you change the text size. I was trying for a long time to figure out how to get it into the middle because it's kind of a bit top aligned. The closest I could find is kicking this up large enough to about a size 36. Gets it approximately into the middle, but there is no specific alignment that I found that works. And really weirdly, if I align it to the middle, it moves it up. If I align it to the top, it moves it to the middle. So I'm not quite sure why it's doing that, but as long as the end result looks good, don't ask questions. So I'll show you a quick thing, and then I'll explain why it's not working as we expect it to. So I'm going to very quickly just run through those states again, put them in here for the traffic light. Remember, careful about scrolling down in here, because you might end up changing this number when you do that. Learned the hard way a few times for that. And we got a 0 on this one. One more 0 there. Finally, that minus. Okay. It looks like it's right. Chuck, can you tell me why that's not coloring appropriately yet? Or can you have a guess?
The constraints, you haven't put the upper and the lower bounds?
I put all the constraints in there yet, but the one thing that this is doing is it's expecting state A value, and like the actual state that's in here right now is simply just 3 calculations. But that's one of the reasons that I love the states with cards is you can have a measure return, essentially it returns one output, but it can base the color coding on an entirely separate measure. So that's
right. So that's actually a brand new feature that we introduced in July, where you can go out and say, I want to actually reference this other column for the value itself. Yep.
Exactly, and matrix tables can do the same thing. So I actually have a video that walks people through how to do conditional formatting based on text. You can actually have like category A, B, and C be blue, purple, and orange, and you can have rows color code based on whatever category they're assigned to from the data. So like lots of cool ways to do that. But in general, the ability to display one thing but format on another is really, really useful to have. And like that, and that's what this card has. And then the matrix table, and I believe the regular table as well, both have in Power BI Desktop. So now we have that corresponding thing where all 3 of them are here. Let's see if I can quickly, flip around a little bit. And there you go. I was trying to get the yellow ones. Yeah, so it corresponds with the 3 of them, and we have both symbols and colors aligning with those values. That will change with the KPI. Now I know we're about 10:53, so there's a couple of things that I'll briefly mention on the formatting, including those lines. But I'm going to try to keep that to about 3 or 4 minutes, just because I want to cover that last cool feature that they added in Power BI Desktop today. So let me quickly come over, fast forward again, go to part 4, and I'll mention to you just a couple of things. Oop, that was a bit of a preview of the next one right here. So yeah, I think the most important ones really are, and I think the least intuitive that I've found. So a couple of things here that we have. The lines are in fact just lines that were added to the table themselves. They can be moved around, and yeah, there's a lot of overlay in Power BI Desktop, but once you publish them, especially if you hide the headers, they disappear. So, or at least the borders around them disappear. And that's just found under the Home tab under Shapes, and you can just add a line to your table. And I just, you basically resize them, shape them up, move them as you need to get them there. And then if you need to rotate to get the horizontal ones. Now, the one kind of clever thing that I did to get this separation here, which I can go to this section, is I've actually created a bunch of text boxes with titles and an empty text box to create these little things at the top. So I'll just quickly point that out. That is simply by adding any empty text box, and I'll just throw that up here quickly, throw this over here. Yep, so I don't put any text in there. I just simply turn on a title. Just call this sales amount. I'm breezing through a little bit. I just want to make sure to save time for one thing. There we go. So something like that. And then now, sized appropriately, these can now become little title cards for each one of these. And the biggest thing that I like about that is it allows for these gaps right here. There we go. Let's try to get the right button. I love to have these in here. And you might even see that I have a little bit of a background color on mine, especially like a gradient color in there. What I will do at the end of this is in the YouTube comments, I'll put a couple links in. I actually have a few videos that walk you through how to add that background, plus a couple of files that have a bunch of colors that are gradients that have been pre-made that you can download as well. But all of these little things they're small things, but individually don't matter that much, but they add up into a final thing that I think really adds an additional pop. And I like the fact that you can kind of see a little bit of a border using that background between all of these, which can kind of be achieved in other single catch-all visualizations, but it's just one of those things, just how much do you want to customize? And I really like customizing and having the freedom to do so, which is why I kind of take a lot of these approaches. So yeah, like that's, I think, basically covers the majority of the things that I wanted to talk about today. We went over these 3 sections in here, which now that you have those is going to allow you to do everything else below here. Because the rest of it's kind of rinse and repeat. But I think it's a really useful layout, and certainly something that I know a lot of people have asked for. I do want to wrap up and cover that kind of new feature that came out. But is there any questions that anybody had about what we went over before I hop over to the other category?
Yeah, Jesse wanted to know if you had a favorite app for actually looking up the emojis and those ASCII characters. And yes, we went out and found one called Unicode Table. Actually, he found it. A great link. So I was actually just playing with it, but I was just curious if you had your own favorite.
Yeah. So there are a couple of sites that have a good solid list of them. I'll link to the other one so I don't spend time looking it up now. But I will say that there's a blog that the one that led me onto this called DAX. If you just Google DAX Unicar function Power BI, it leads to Matt Ellington's post, and he actually down here has a great short list of useful characters that could be relevant to specifically to Power BI reports, including the chart increasing and decreasing, a couple of emojis, thumbs ups, thumbs downs, things that would be relevant in reports. But there are thousands of them out there plus to use. But this is a good starting point. All right. Good question. Yeah, let me pop over to this. Yeah, so I know we only got a couple minutes, but you can see the gorgeous visages of myself and Chuck here in front of you. So what they have, and they released in this month's update with Power BI, is the ability to categorize DAX by categories. And that was something previously only available to do on columns and rows in there, where you could return an image, but it was a fixed row assigned to something. So what I've done is I actually have this related to KPI. So Chuck gets the down arrow, Reid gets the up arrow here. He looks a little bit frustrated in this photo too.
Yeah, I'm normally frustrated.
Right? Yeah. So and you can watch here too as I click around, you'll see that these are changing because these are DAX calculations that are returning one of 2 URLs using the switch function. So it's operating almost identically as this KPI. So I can even show. There we go.
Dig out that measure, because that actually, see what he's doing there. He's actually going out. Oh wait, where are you concatenating to the URL itself?
This thing. I can show you this is the measure that I have right.
There it is. There it is. Okay, so you can see here where he's actually just hard coded one or the other, but he could have actually built that string. So imagine where you're actually not building a string to a JPEG, but you're actually building a string to an SVG file, because you can actually take arguments of, hey, I want it to be this high, this width, starting at this location. So you can
man.
Oh yeah. So it opens up. I'm going to put a link in there, and David Eversfield, I'm pronouncing it horribly. I apologize, David. We'll come back and we'll actually do a blog post or a webinar on exactly that. But using that whole paradigm, you can usually even use MIME encoding and build your own images. I mean, just to go absolutely crazy. So anyways, I'm going to give it back to Reid to close.
Yeah, so in general, that about covers it. I'm actually kind of excited that I got to show this at the end of it. It's anytime a new Power BI feature comes out, it's like a mini Christmas. So yeah, there's a lot of really great ways to customize stuff. This template, I will make sure there's going to be a file download link that will link back to my site that you guys are welcome to download this as a file and use as you want, rip it apart. And if you find things useful for it, feel free to continue to just to use it and adapt with it. But yeah, overall, for all of you that are joining, thanks for listening in. I do have a blog subscription that you're welcome to go check out. It usually is about once a week, has a video series on various stuff like this and pretty much anything related to Power BI. A lot of useful features, and all really good content on there. But otherwise, yeah, I know we're past the time, so I just wanted to say have a great rest of your days, and I'm sure I'll see you somewhere in the near future on the interwebs.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Reid. I'm going to go ahead and bring it to a close. You have a great day.